trying to be positive. We're trying to be positive, and now we are positive.
We're positive.
We were positive.
Gave birth.
We gave birth with another fertility story coming at you with my beloved Ashley. I didn't want to should I last name you?
You can if you want.
I feel like I shouldn't.
Okay.
It makes it more
mysterious.
It's anonymous with this YouTube channel of mine. I like adding these fertility stories in the mix amongst my Anne Rants and the expert series. And I think the response I get from my audience with regards to the fertility stories is by far the best.
Because people can relate.
They can relate.
They feel it.
People love a story.
People love stories, and you don't know what anyone's going through. And I think on our fertility journey, that's kind of what I learned a little bit. It's like you don't really know what people are going through until you're in it yourself.
Yeah.
Kind of weird.
No, that's absolutely the case. I think because the clinic is a community clinic, the number of people who have come in and saw somebody that they knew and realized, oh, okay, you're in this with me.
Yes, I'm not alone.
Yeah. So let's jump right in to your fertility story, wherever you feel is the most natural entrance.
Okay. Well, I think the beginning probably makes sense.
There we go.
Starting at the beginning. So I would say about 2 years ago, my partner and I decided to actively trying to have kids. And we were one of those people saying the thing you should never say. We tried and got pregnant right away. We were very lucky. I was 36 at the time, so I wasn't a spring chicken, but certainly I wasn't old.
That's pretty spring-like.
I mean, I felt great.
Chicky.
Still do.
Yeah.
And we got pregnant, and about 10 weeks later, unfortunately, we had a miscarriage, and it was probably the most devastating moment of my life because I have felt often anything I put my mind to, I can do. And this was something, we got pregnant, we're going to have a baby. They're due June 2nd. I had built this plan of what this hopes and dreams look like and this timeline. And unfortunately, we miscarried at 10 weeks and it was awful. I actually don't think I've gone through anything worse in my life. I think what was the worst part about the miscarriage is it actually felt like I lost the baby 3 times.
Right.
It was a Friday morning. I had some bleeding and I just knew in my heart of hearts that something was wrong. Then we went to the hospital and they were like, okay, you have miscarried. And this young male doctor was like, you're going to take these pills. It's going to feel like a couple period cramps. You'll be fine. So I went home. Unfortunately, took
misoprostol.
That one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did not feel like slight period cramps. It was, I can now say, worse than giving birth, the pain.
Yeah.
And I felt like that was the second loss. And then about a month later, I came back from a vacation and they actually did a ultrasound to make sure that I had passed everything. And unfortunately, I hadn't. And so I was still testing positive and I had to actually go get a DNC. And so having to wake up that morning to some bleeding, to then do the pills a couple days later, to then do a DNC another month later, it felt like 3 losses. It just felt like it kept happening. And I think, that's a lot of detail about a loss, but no one talks about it. I was like, oh yeah, I miscarried. But actually the process of miscarrying can look very different for different people. And it is so sad and so discouraging when all you want to do is try again. And you can't. And everyone says, wait, wait.
Yeah.
We got to do this. We got to go through that. So that was really, really challenging when we miscarried. And at that point, I'll never forget it. The day my doctor called and said, okay, you've got some retained tissues. You need to get a DNC. I've never felt more low in my life because it had been a month since it had happened. And I was like, how is this still going on? All of that to say, once we went through the DNC, it was the end of December at that time. And we finally got the call from our doctor being like, okay, your HCG is low enough. You can start trying again. And I was like, I need a team. I'm not doing this again. I do not want to have the same type of loss. I don't actually think I could survive that type of loss again. I need a team. And that's when I found you. Yay!
Yes.
A key team member assembled.
You know what's funny though is I don't think that was that much detail.
Yeah, I mean,
Like
there's more, but
the fact that I'm bringing it up only because I feel like with miscarriage and with loss, we gloss over it.
Totally.
Even with the menstrual cramp or this will be like a period.
It was worse than labor.
I've never hemorrhaged with my periods and had to go to the ER. So
I was screaming on the toilet and my partner was like, do I need to call an ambulance? And I was like, I actually don't know.
Yeah.
Like I've never been in this much pain in my life. And honestly, the fact that this doctor sent me home was like, it's going to feel like period cramps. And it was that bad and was like, oh, you could take a couple Tylenol if you want. I was like, what? That is not okay.
Yeah.
He just had no idea what it was like. I obviously didn't know going into it what it was going to be like. It was unbelievable. It was just like, I can't believe that this is actually allowed. I was kind of like, should I be doing this at the hospital? Like, it's that type of pain.
I feel like it's in our society and like in our culture, you don't talk about your pregnancy until you're 12 weeks. So in most of these instances,
you're doing this alone.
You're doing this alone.
You have no one to go to.
You have no one to talk to.
Yes. And it's very scary.
And then you're supposed to go to work the next day.
Totally.
And be a normal person.
Yes.
Can you imagine giving birth and then going to work the next day?
No.
That'd be insane.
And I will say, I'm very lucky. I work for a tech company and I lead a sales team. And I actually shared with them what I was going through. So I was very fortunate that I didn't have to go to work the next day and that I had a lot of support around me. And I would also say what's interesting is a number of people at my place of work shared with me that they had experienced something similar. And I had no idea. And I mean, you wouldn't because people don't talk about it unless you're going through it.
Yeah.
And so something, as I've come out of this experience that I have committed to is I'm going to talk about it so that if someone needs a safe place to go or to ask questions or to learn about my experience or just someone to be like, I'm so sorry you had that loss, that I could be that for them. I think it's so important.
Yeah. Amazing. Okay. Back to your team.
Okay. Where were we here?
You assembled a team.
I was after that loss, I was like, I am getting pregnant. And I think that's when I came to you.
Mission.
I was on a mission to get into you, which I know can be very tough. Mission, had lots of people helping me get into you. Finally, we were able to chat. And I remember sitting down with you right over there in that window and saying like, I need to get pregnant. I've had this loss. It felt like 3 losses in one. And I want to have a baby and I need your help. And I will do anything you tell me. Whatever you tell me to do, my partner and I, luckily he was on board, we will do.
Well, he was the instigator.
He was.
He was your golden ticket.
Was he?
Yeah. My greatest qualm is when people's partners are not involved or they somehow think that they're going to get pregnant with their egg alone and then just through osmosis in the presence of their partner, even if they have garbage sperm, are somehow going to
get pregnant,
like create life, like a slug person.
Yes.
Just self reproducing as opposed to 2 pairs of DNA.
He was definitely part of the team. I think after he saw me and himself emotionally go through that loss, he was like, I will do anything to help you and I am in this with you. And so he ended up reaching out to you on Instagram, I think. Yeah, I actually didn't know.
Yeah, he DM'd me.
He DM'd you on Instagram. Because I wouldn't stop talking about you. I was like, I have to see this woman, Energy Tree Ann. She is the person I need to go to. And he was like, who? What? I was like, this is her. I kept sending him stuff that you would post about like sperm health. And I was like, okay, you can't bike. You can't have heat. Like there's so many things you need to stop doing. He was like, okay. Anyways, he messaged you.
Angel,
Hayden.
Yeah, Hayden. Love him.
God love Hayden. So we came here and I'll never forget, you said to me, you looked at me dead in the straight. Once I told you my whole full story, everything that had been happening, you look at me and you're like, this is going to be easy. Do you remember saying that to me? Do you actually?
Yeah.
And I was like,
I said it was going to be a slam dunk.
yeah.
You were going to be something that was a little feather in my cap.
Yeah. And I was like, it was the first time since the initial loss that someone had said that to me. Every other doctor had been like really doubtful, like, oh, this could happen again. And if it does, then there's this. I was like, what? And it was the first time, even Hayden was like, this may be a little bit more of a journey. And I was mentally preparing myself for like, okay, this is going to be a longer journey. But when you said that to me, I was like, this is the energy I need. This is the energy. See, energy tree.
Energy tree.
See what I did there?
Yes.
This is the energy I need. And just the fact that you believed that this could be easy and you said it, I was like, okay, this is going to be easy. And it wasn't without its bumps because I did have another.
It was shortly after.
Shortly after, yeah. So we worked together for January, February. I got pregnant again in March and I had a miscarriage at 4 weeks, a chemical miscarriage. And for whatever reason, like I was bummed. I would say I was disappointed, but I wasn't as like devastatedly sad. I also, when I got pregnant that time, I think maybe you even said to me, you're like, you feel really nervous about this pregnancy.
Like I needed, you know what it was? Is like, I like to have 90 days. Or
too soon.
It was just shy. And because at that point, I'm like, okay, we've matured with our eggs.
Yes.
We have got the sperm, a whole new set.
Whole new.
74 to 90 days. We have a whole new set of what we were working with prior. And we were just shy of that. So I was a little nervous because miscarriage, 50% of all miscarriage is DNA fragmentation.
Yes.
Sperm. And so it has to be cream of the crop. And so I was a little nervous about that. But I also, we hadn't been working on clotting for long enough. And so I was a little nervous about that.
And you were right to be nervous.
But you were the difference between you accepting that and the difference and somebody else, like the majority of patients at that point in current society, like right now, the majority of people, if they had a chemical after a miscarriage, off they'd go to IVF, which increases your chances of a live birth with recurrent miscarriage by 2%. So the success rate is devastating.
Yes.
Because you're not improving your odds significantly enough for what you have to go through in that process.
To jump right into it.
So I was so grateful at that point that you were like, okay, let's go. Let's keep going.
We're going to keep going.
Oh, yes.
Believe in Anne's energy.
I can do this.
And then what happened? So I had that miscarriage and it did feel discouraging. I think Hayden and I were at a point, and me certainly, where I was like, can I carry a baby? You start really questioning, is this ever going to happen for me? Is it me? Is it you? Is it us? Like what is happening here? And I'm very lucky that I was able to have those conversations with him and be very open about it. And, we talked, we're like, okay, well, there's lots of options and this isn't the end of the road. And, there was still a large runway of hope. And I think that's something when you have a miscarriage or have multiple miscarriages, that hope gets sucked out of you so fast. It's just so hard. And that hope goes away. And so, really focused on rebuilding that hope. We were living our life as you do when you're trying to get pregnant 1 week at a time, because 1 week is your period. 1 week is the time you can get pregnant. 1 week is the waiting week. And the next week is the week where you get to test. That is how we were living our life. And that is mentally taxing on its own because you're literally living in this week to week increment, which I had never done before.
Yeah. Not stressing about not stressing.
Yeah. And then you're trying to be like, okay, well, I can't stress because if I stress, stress isn't good for it. All of that to say, we had that second loss. After that loss, it felt fundamentally different because I felt better educated by you. And also I felt maybe more confident in myself to ask for what I needed from the health professionals and my doctors. And so after that loss, I actually also went to the hospital and they were like, okay, I made sure all the tissue had passed. And I was like, I want an ultrasound. They did one. All the tissue had passed. And I actually had enough wherewithal to be like, I would like to also go to a pregnancy loss clinic, which I had no idea about after my first loss. And they sent me to one at Mount Sinai and they were amazing. She was like, okay, we're going to do some blood work. Don't go to the blood work section in this building because there's a bunch of pregnant people there and you're not going to want to see them. Like they were just so thoughtful and so caring. Anyways, and I just think if you go through miscarriage, it's not like you need to go through it alone. And if someone hasn't referred you to a pregnancy loss clinic, early loss clinic, I highly recommend going because they can just help give you resources and support that I didn't have the first time.
Yeah. St. Mike's and Sunnybrook with the Pale Network are great.
Okay. And Anne always knows the best places to go.
No, I didn't know that about Sinai. And
Sinai was very good.
That advice alone.
Right.
To avoid being in the same vicinity at that moment in time with other pregnant bellies is so key.
Thoughtful.
Because you were special to me as well because I've had 5 miscarriages.
Mm-hmm.
And so I knew your headspace. Like I'd been there. And that feeling of maybe I can't do this. Maybe this is not in the cards for me. Maybe this will just keep happening. And going from, an ultrasound where you find out that there is no heartbeat to where I had to at that point go to my OB office to get my ROGAM shot. I'm waiting in the waiting room with just pregnant women.
It's awful.
And I'm hating myself for hating them.
Yes.
And I'm hating myself for hating them and also judging them, being at that point, 26 years old and thinking, what the hell? That woman over there is clearly also a grandmother. And here I am, 26.
It is really
what is
hard.
happening to me? And then being what is wrong with you? You are so hateful.
I know.
And it goes on. It goes on.
You see people walking. We live in a very young family-oriented neighborhood. I saw people walking with their babies in their strollers. And I was like, I want that. That's not fair. And not a lot in my life have I felt that resentful or, really wanted something else like that. But it's normal. I think it's a very normal thing to feel.
100%.
And it's really good to have people you can talk about it with.
Yes.
To know that other people have gone through it, to know that being this person's pregnant, or I'm seeing people with strollers and I have to cross the street because I can't see that because I want it so badly.
Yeah.
It's oddly normal if you're going through recurrent loss.
There's so many patients that I have who have friends that are getting pregnant very easily.
Ugh,
and they're saying, I don't get it. So-and-so smoked so much weed and she didn't even want this. And why can't this happen for me? And I feel like when you've had a miscarriage, you're almost a little bit excluded from those conversations as well because you at least can get pregnant.
I cannot with that.
You're but a baby would be great.
But I'd love to carry it to term.
The positive is not actually
yes
that great without the outcome.
Yes. It's very challenging. It's a very difficult thing. I had lots of friends who got pregnant very easily. And so it's just, I had fewer people to turn to. I did have one friend who is in nursing who had shared with me very early on years ago that she had had a miscarriage, and I was able to call her. And she, but she was the only person I truly had. And thank goodness I had her at that moment. But it's really important, I think, to share because it's very tough. It's a very tough thing to go through.
Yeah. I think having more and more resources, and I'm definitely going to be providing more of those for people that can't get in to see me, whose husbands aren't quite as industrious. Because one of my greatest qualms right now is the immediate referral to the fertility clinic, because the number of miracle babies that I have helped come into the world by simply giving some basic tweaks to the
Yes.
lifestyle, it's huge.
It's huge. It's hard, right? Like that time that you have to wait, like even though it was only 90 days,
Yeah.
those 90 days still felt like a long time. Like we were so excited when we got pregnant again in March, a little apprehensive, certainly ended up losing that baby. And I was like, okay, we got to do this again. I will say what was lucky is after that loss, all the health professionals actually told us to not try again. And I was like, it'd be like the next week. It's like, I think we were going away. And I was like, should I try? Should I not try? And my doctor was like, don't try. The early pregnancy clinic was like, maybe don't try this time. And I came to you, I think it was like the day before we were leaving on the trip. And you were like, try.
Absolutely. Been 90 days.
You're like, do it. Because I think like it had like literally that trip coincided exactly with the 90 days.
Yeah.
And you were like, try. Have a great time. Try. Sure enough, we tried and we were pregnant. We came back and we were pregnant. 90 days.
Success.
You got to give yourself at least 90 days.
It's the turnover.
Yeah. We carried Ivy. I carried Ivy to full term. I brought an Ivy plant for Anne. Carried her to full term and happy, healthy, great little baby. She's 8 months now.
Yeah. That pregnancy was like, I wasn't in it. So, and sometimes I'll say to patients like, and your pregnancy was easy. And they're like, shut up. It was not easy, but it was relatively pretty good.
It was a great pregnancy. It was a little rough at the beginning with some nausea, but I was like so happy for the nausea. I was like, yes, I'm pregnant. I will take the nausea. I got through the first, call it 14 weeks, and things really changed and it was great. I came to see you after our 20-week appointment. Thriving. Everything was ticky-boo. We didn't know that it was a girl at that point. We waited until the end. I came to see you at the end of my pregnancy.
Yes.
And I think I only got in maybe 1 or 2 visits with you. Two visits. And I showed up at the hospital and was 5 centimeters dilated and had no idea I was in labor. And I definitely give you a lot of credit for that.
Do you remember when I was like, don't have a January baby?
Yes.
January's terrible.
Yeah. Did you contrive this? I feel like, because I was like, I want a January baby. My due date was December 30th. And I was like, Anne, I'm going to go late. I wanted like January 5th baby is what I want. And you were like, no.
I've been a January baby my whole life.
And you were like, don't do it.
I hate it. I'm going to Australia for my birthday this year so I can have a summer birthday.
Fun.
Yeah, but that's how much I hate it.
So you had a hand in this. I knew it.
December is a great month. Everyone's happy. You're full of excitement. Everyone's off.
She was a month early. We were unprepared.
There's Starbucks cups.
You beautiful Starbucks cups.
Even Starbucks is celebratory. Yeah. Then January comes and it's back to the white.
Well,
womp, womp,
you got what you wanted.
Womp.
And I truly believe that the treatments before I had her made her come early and made my labor, in the labor stories I have heard, mine was very easy. It was a wonderful experience.
Oh my God, I love that.
I walked in 5 centimeters. We had no idea what was happening. We were 5 centimeters dilated. I felt nothing, did not have a contraction. And then they started coming.
Right.
Which was awful. But it was only about 40 minutes, got the epidural, and I don't know, by 10 a.m. she was here.
The one time that you were slightly panicky in your pregnancy.
Oh, yes.
Was when you had an unqualified, was she an OB or a GP?
She was a resident.
And she told you that the fact that you were on methylfolate was problematic and that your baby likely was going to be born with neurotube defects, and then we'll just have to wait and see until 20 weeks.
Never. It was my. So I get through these 14 weeks.
Methylfolate and whoops.
I make it through the first trimester and I go to my first OB appointment and I am
excited,
pumped.
Yeah,
I made it. I'm gonna go see my OB. My OB was on vacation and it's a teaching hospital, so I had a resident, which I was like, okay, like I don't really know the difference.
Yeah,
sure. Like I don't really know what even happens at this appointment. And I show up to this appointment. Hayden's with me. Of course, he went to every appointment. Hayden's with me. And she was like, okay, what are you taking? Like, what prenatal supplements are you taking? And of course, I pull up my 14 pills that I take a day.
Yeah.
Because you tell me to, and I do whatever you tell me to. And she was like, well, you're not taking folic acid. And I was like, well, I mean, the name isn't folic acid, but I think it's covered in this repertoire of
in
pills.
2 repertoires. 3
Right.
repertoires.
And she was like, well, I don't know, you didn't take any folic acid and now you're already past 12 weeks. So I guess we'll just see you at your 20-week appointment. And first of all, to say that to someone who was pregnant and, she didn't know that I had 2 miscarriages. Like, she had no idea. Like, says that to somebody. There's, I think, a better way to approach it. Probably needs to work on our bedside manner. Anyways, all of that to say, I got out of that appointment and I looked at Hayden and started bawling because all you want to do is be pregnant. And then once you are pregnant, all you want to do is the best for that little being inside of you. And you give up all these things and you're so happy to give it up. And you take all these things and you're so happy to take them because you just want them to thrive and grow. It's no different when they come out of you. It's the same thing.
Yes.
And I remember looking at Hayden and being like, I am 14 weeks into this pregnant and I've already messed up this child, and just started bawling. I'm like, I'm not taking folic acid. And it's not like you can go back in time and take folic acid. That time is over. The window's over. I even asked her. She was like, it doesn't really matter now. If you took it, it wouldn't do anything. And I remember texting you on Instagram in a flurry of panic. I think you were driving to the clinic.
I was running.
You were running.
Stopped and
oh my gosh.
It was raining and I pulled it out and was like, oh my God.
I was like, Anne, they said I should be taking folic acid and I'm not taking folic acid. Like, what is happening? And then you talked me off a ledge. And then you had an Anne rant on it, I think.
Yeah, I did. I did an Anne's rant.
Yeah, it was a good one.
And then Lily Nichols came on my podcast because of it.
See? It's important.
She's the best fertility dietitian in North America. And she came on because of you.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, it was such misinformation.
Yes.
And so how you explained it to me was that often what happens with recurrent loss is that your body is unable to absorb folic acid in that state.
There's a percentage of the population that has a genetic variant that makes it so that they cannot actually.
And they don't do the test for it.
Basically like methylate.
Right.
And so folic acid will just not be properly absorbed and they won't be able to use it.
But they don't test for it, right? Or like
you can, but it requires like extensive blood work and
Right.
it requires a clinic to actually look into it.
And so instead of folic acid, you had put me on methylfolate because it was one of your perhaps thoughts of why we were having recurrent loss.
Yes, exactly. Because it's one of the, if let's say we found out that you had the MTHFR genetic variant, then you would go on methylfolate and potentially aspirin.
Yes.
But because you weren't under the supervision of a fertility clinic, we opted instead to do methylfolate and high dose of fish oil to ensure that you had that same thinning of the blood that would potentially be important for that. But of course, like this wasn't the thought process of this young resident, and instead
Terrified
she
me. 14 weeks pregnant, bawling in the parking lot
freaked
outside
you
Mount
out.
Sinai. Yeah.
Yeah.
But you talked me off a ledge.
And then ranted.
Which was also very helpful.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because, I remember that young doctor being like, well, that's what Canada's guideline says. And I was like, well, I wonder.
Because you can use the synthetic folic acid to fortify food with.
Yes.
And so that's why they have so many studies on it and its benefit.
It's
not to say it's not good.
Totally. And it's probably great for lots of people.
Better than nothing.
Right.
And for 70% of the population, absolutely crucial.
Yes.
However,
for those of us that
that's a significant portion that are left out.
And if I hadn't have come to you, I just would have done the same thing. And who knows, right? But like, my theory is probably would have continued having recurrent loss. It was quite a journey.
It's really irritating too because there's this one particular OB in the States who is she's a bully on TikTok. And she comes after all of these dietitians who are providing recent and notable research on this.
Frustrating.
And her claim to fame is to come back at it saying, well, I have clinical experience. With what? with like babies being born? Those aren't the people that we're concerned about.
Yeah, we're concerned about the people who...
Were their mothers on like a professional grade prenatal? You're telling me that this methylfolate that was in this professional grade prenatal? Because instead they're recommending the OHIP covered prenatal, which is what Pregvit. And it's...
Oh, yes, I've heard of that.
It has known carcinogens in the ingredient list. And that's what's covered by OHIP. That's what's recommended with synthetic folic acid.
Hard.
I just can't.
Yeah, it's really tough. And I think, you know, what you're doing with the podcast here and all, even your rants, it really helps educate people, because who would know that? I would not have known that. I would have no idea. And like my doctor probably wouldn't have known that. And to do that test, like how to know to even ask for that test?
Well, it's funny because I've had fertility clinics run those tests, find out a patient actually had the variant, and then still put them on a higher amount of folic acid. But it's okay, because at that point I can then say, look, this is a good reason for us to potentially switch clinics.
Yeah. I will say there was one point where I said to you, like, I actually went to my doctor and said, like, I would like to like start looking at IVF. I wasn't going to like jump into it. I was just like, you know, I've had 2 miscarriages.
Yeah.
I'd like to just like put it on the list of options as I continue to go through my journey.
As we go forth.
And she said to me, okay. And she, you know, gave me a referral to a clinic, and I think I had an appointment here shortly after, and I gave you the name, and you're like, yeah, that's a no. You can't go there. But here are some other names that you can now go back to your doctor and ask you to refer you to, which was, you know, I think you probably can't publicly say them, but it is very helpful to have that type of guidance when you're going through this, because you don't know. And your doctor, I don't even know how doctors refer clinics, but they refer whatever.
I feel like they will know of a clinic, a patient will have a good experience.
And then refer based on that.
They refer based on that. Or they know the doctors as people and not as clinicians.
Right.
Which is problematic because it could very different scenarios. And I think it's important to note that there are no bad clinics. There are just bad clinics for certain people.
Oh, that's a good way to frame it.
Like, for instance, some clinics might have a really great lab. And the patient has, for example, I have one patient and she's screening for a genetic disorder. And so she needs to do IVF, not because she has fertility problems per se, but because she's
genetic.
Exactly trying to rule out and screen so that she can ensure that that's not something that is an issue for them in the future, be it that they are carriers or actually have the disorder. So in her case, she just needed a really good lab.
Right.
She didn't need anything specific. It didn't need to be a clinic that might keep in mind whether she had endo or PCOS.
Right. She just needed the lab work.
She just needed the lab. She didn't need any immune testing.
But how do you know that if you're not you? Like, how do you know which one has the good lab, or which one is better with endo, or which one is better? You know, like, you don't.
Yeah, that's the problem. It's also interesting, like, only now are they acknowledging that endo is even a concern when it comes to fertility. Just interesting. They're like, we're very concerned about it. Would you change your treatment protocol if you have endo? Oh, no, absolutely not. Like, what are you concerned about then?
Going through like the miscarriage and loss, and even the journey to become pregnant, you very quickly realize that our medical system was built by men. And it's just the insensitivity to the journey is wild, and just the loss. And even that young doctor being like, you're gonna take these pills, it's gonna be a couple cramps, you'll be fine.
Yeah.
Like, okay, sure. And I had no idea. I didn't know any different. I didn't even know where to look. I had no idea. So I did what I was told. Yeah, it was not like that. I would not recommend that.
It's really interesting. It's tough too, because I have such positive experiences with doctors outside of fertility.
Yes.
And I was saying this to one of my patients today because she was like, I just don't get how this is how this is happening. Like, how can this have happened to me? And it's true. Like, certain mistakes that are made, certain recommendations that are made that would never happen so flippantly to, pediatric patient, to an oncology patient. But somehow fertility, it's okay. I don't understand why.
It's like women's pain, you
Yeah.
know? Like it's like, it's fine.
Yeah, you'll be okay.
You'll be okay.
You can deal.
You got this. Like, no. It was worse than labor. I can say that now that I've gone through both.
It's also an issue of and this sounds very conspiracy theorist, and it's not intended to. It's just a statement of fact. The business model of fertility doesn't benefit the patient.
Yeah.
They benefit more from your lack of success than your success. And that was something that in my looking at my own model and how I wanted to operate, it's why I kick you guys out
we don't like that
12
time.
weeks.
I hated that.
Because my goal isn't for you to be my patient. My goal is for you to be pregnant.
Yes.
And I want you to be pregnant and out of here as fast as possible.
Yes. You do want that.
I do.
I remember lying here in my last appointment.
I don't want the same patient for years.
Crying, just bawling. I did not want to leave. Like, how do I not come here? I came here every week for me, it was shorter. It was only 5 months. And I loved those 5 months. And you were right. It was going to be easy. And you made it as easy as you could. But I remember coming here to my last appointment and literally bawling and just being so sad to leave. But it's true. You're focused on the success. And I think that's why you have a waiting list that is so long and you are so sought after because you are so deeply educated about all of the issues. You are so passionate about it and you want people to be successful.
I love you guys.
Yeah, we love you and our babies love you, you know?
That's for fertility clinics. If we were to change
it would be different.
Instead of looking at the longevity of a lead, in that you want to maintain that single lead, you don't want that. Get that lead out. Okay?
Get the next one in.
Out. Out. And then you know what happens? The more people are on the outside of your business talking about how you help them, the more people will come in your business.
100%.
To get success.
It's funny you mentioned that. I had asked my doctor to refer us to this IVF and we weren't in any rush. We were like, whenever, because I was working with you. She had referred us and we ended up having a call with them, I think the end of April. And it was like 2 days after I tested positive with our now daughter. And I remember that call with this doctor as a gentleman and he was, nice enough, but like it kind of felt like a baby factory. Like they have a job and their job is to get pregnant. It was a clinic you mentioned and they were great, but I literally at, midway through the call, I was like, so, just so you know, I am currently testing positive for pregnancy. And his whole demeanor changed. He was like, oh, okay, well, let's just see what happens. And they were lovely. They were like, we'll get you into our early pregnancy clinic. So we did do that. And they just tracked the baby more closely every week. And that's how we worked with them. But it's true. Like I think immediately he was like, oh, like this is not going to be the revenue that maybe it could have been. And not that he was thinking that.
He for sure was.
Well, I don't know what he was thinking.
I don't mind. Like, I just wish that people were forthcoming.
Right.
Like when you go to a plastic surgeon, I don't care that you're driving Ferrari. I don't care.
Right.
If I need IVF and it's quite like if I don't have tubes and I need IVF, I will happily give you $25,000 and you can do whatever you want with it because it won't matter.
Yes.
The problem is if I don't need it and you're still extracting this from me in funding.
Not okay.
No.
It's not okay. Yeah. 100%.
Especially if it's multiple times.
Yeah.
And then I end up having an immune concern.
And he just was totally missed. It's unfair. It's unfair.
Danny, one of our previous guests, she said she went through a period of time after finding out that she didn't even need to go through IVF and that she actually did just have an immune concern, she was pissed.
Of course.
Instead of being excited
She was just
about her
mad.
pregnancy, she was mad.
I'm sure.
And I feel like that's,
It's a real
huge part of our
problem.
problem.
It's a real problem. But that's why we need people to like advocate and talk about it so that you know what to ask for. And I remember you being like, you need to ask for these blood tests. And so I would go to the early pregnancy clinic and I'd be like, I need these things. You have to test these things. And they'd be like, okay. They thought I was crazy, but I was like, I don't care. I'll ask anybody for anything. And I think that's something that I learned on the journey is that you are your best advocate. And you need to ask for what you want. And so if you want referrals places, if you want to see other people, whether that's from, and I have a great family doctor. I love her. She was wonderful. She really like cared about our journey. And the first time she met Ivy, she cried because she had been on this journey with us.
Yeah.
But like you need to advocate for yourself and you need to ask for certain things. Ask for them. Don't be afraid to ask them and stand up for yourself because it's important.
Is that your final thought? Is that your takeaway?
My takeaway?
Yeah. Like if you... like Lewis Howes, I'm a big fan of the School of Greatness. It's a good podcast. And he asked this long-winded question at the end and he really builds it up with you can never come back and like all your work is gone and we don't know how you died. And I'm like, Lewis, get to the point here, man. But it's a good question. And it's like, what is your truth about all that you went through? Like if you could give somebody one piece of advice with regards to going through loss and then buoying back up.
Yeah.
Like, what would you say?
The first thing I would say is I'm sorry because people often say the wrong thing.
Yeah.
And the best thing to say is I'm sorry because it fucking sucks. I don't know if I can swear, but I just did.
Please. Yeah.
It sucks. And you just need to like rest in the fact that it fucking sucks and that's okay. And the second thing I would say is more people than you can even think have gone through this and have been where you are and have come out the other side better for it. And so you are not alone and you can do this. And you would be amazed at how many people have been through it. So reach out. Don't be afraid to talk about it and don't be afraid to ask for help. That would be what I would say.
I love that.
It's important. That's how I got my gusto to keep going.
Yeah.
People around me.
That's amazing. Yeah. So many people too they're nervous to admit that it's happening to them or that it has happened to them. But it's sort of like that once the initial veil has been lifted, you're like, oh, there's a lot of you here.
And that's the thing. You
grandmother, aunts, mother,
yes.
sister, bridesmaids,
colleagues, friends, like who you feel safe sharing with, like share and you will find the people that have gone through it.
Yeah.
Are going through it.
And I think having empathy, if you haven't from the get-go.
Yes.
It's funny. I had, when I shared that I had a miscarriage online, one of my friends who had not a terrible time getting pregnant the first and second time, she'd never had a miscarriage. And she said, honestly, like, I love you, but who cares? Like, you already have kids and like, you just need to be grateful for those kids. And I don't know what the point is in wallowing in this misery. Like, just give your attention to your kids. And, at the time I was like, honestly, just respectfully
go away. Please leave.
When I look at my existing children, I don't love them less. Yes. I just don't feel like it's complete.
Yeah, you want more.
And I want more. And so I think it's important to be empathetic at any stage.
Totally.
Because that same person has now been seeing me for recurrent loss. And it's not to say like, oh, this came back as a karma. No. But more, she's then since said, that was really short-sighted of me. And I think if we can imagine ourselves in a person's shoes before we're in fact in those shoes,
it makes a big difference.
We would be so much better off, just generally.
Just as a society,
Yeah.
just as humans.
Yeah.
100%. That being thoughtful and just, for me, the loss at 10 weeks was devastating. The loss at 4 weeks was disappointing and I didn't feel sad, but a loss is a loss. And I know lots of people who have had losses at 4 weeks and feel absolutely devastated. And that is so valid. So whether it's 4, 10, later, whenever that loss is, it is heartbreaking when it's the only thing you want. And so I think just keeping that in mind as well, because some people will be like, oh, well, it's only 4 weeks. It's just like a heavier period. And I'm like, well, it wasn't, because it was a positive test. And, I was at a emotional fortitude that I could handle people saying that to me. But, the first time I wouldn't have been okay with that.
Well, and if it's a chemical after years of fertility treatments,
Heartbreaking.
like absolutely shattering.
Yes.
And because you'll hold on to that forever.
Yes. And it's, as soon as you get that positive test, often one of the first things you do is, oh, my due date. My due date is June 2nd.
I was going to say at the beginning, you said June 2nd.
I knew my due date. It was June 2nd, and so I was fortunate that when that June 2nd came and went, I was pregnant with Ivy, but a lot of people wouldn't be. And that would be a very hard day.
Yeah.
Because you have so much, you attach so many hopes and dreams to that day, and it comes and goes, and you're maybe at a different spot in your journey, or you're still trying, or maybe you are pregnant. You don't know where you're going to be. But it's very difficult. And so a loss is a loss. And again, it kind of hits you once, and then potentially can hit you again in another way, because you're like, oh, this would have been the date. I still think of June 2nd, and I'm like, oh,
yeah, I have all 5 in my brain.
Yeah. So those.
I bought things for them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
totally.
And I could never use those things.
No, that was it was for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And 100%. Their little assigned nickname.
One thing. So I went on I had a pre-scheduled trip just after the first miscarriage, and it was actually to Bali. I was going with my mom to do yoga, which was really lovely, and arguably became very serendipitous in timing, because I had a miscarriage the week before we were meant to leave. And so I was cleared to go, and I saw a Balinese Reiki healer while I was there. And he, obviously knew nothing of my story. And he said lots of tears and around my uterus.
Wow.
I know. It was a very powerful moment. And I, ended up sharing with him my story. I said, I actually just had a miscarriage a couple weeks ago. And he was like, his family had a miscarriage too. He's like, my wife had a miscarriage too. And he shared, he's like, I think of miscarriage. He's like, in Balinese culture, they say we think of miscarriages as, that spirit fulfilled their time on earth, and it saved them from a life of suffering, because in their culture, to actually live a life is to suffer. And whether that helps someone or not, it really helped me to be like, oh, this spirit is at peace and they are okay.
Yeah.
It was just a nice moment to kind of help me end that.
Yeah, I love that
season. Yeah. Of, that spirit came, they did what they needed to do. And I'm not a religious person. I'm an energy person. And they came what they needed to do. And, they just needed a shorter time on earth to do what they needed to do and be here.
Fill their energetic journey.
Feel what they needed to do this time. And it just helped me reframe that loss. So it's helpful for me.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah. Thank you for sharing your story and coming on here.
Yeah, this is great. It's good to see you.
I know. Good times. Let's go do some acu.
I wish. My best rests were here.
Honestly. Carmela would be like, you did what? After? Thank you so much for listening this week. Every time that you listen, you share, you rate, you review, it helps boost our show, which not only gives me the motivation to carry forth, but also helps attract new guests with new information. So thank you so much. Please don't forget, again, rate, review, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we'll talk to you soon on the next episode.